Just because there's no reaction doesn't mean Kristen doesn't acknowledge you. Let's become a family slowly. It was because of what Brian said that I was able to go through with this marriage. Now, 10 years after the marriage, Kristen has turned 22 and is about to graduate from university. Shamefully, I don't know what Kristen plans are after graduating from university. Even when I casually ask Brian, he coldly says, "What Kristen decides to do from here on has nothing to do with you." A response that hardly seems familial. Huh? I told you it's none of your business, right? If you keep nagging about it, then give me $100,000. I'm going to get married and buy a house, so I need $100,000 for the house mortgage. That's what you can do for me. Kristen tells me this with a half smile. It's a face that says, as if you could do that. You're not even my real mom, acting all high and mighty with just a little bit of money. You're not even invited to the wedding. I understand. I am not her real mother. Yet, even being fake. The fact that Kristen uses the word mom towards me makes something well up inside me. That is my weakness. I have tried to meet Kristen's demands as much as possible. When I couldn't, I often fell into severe self-loathing. So, I will try to meet them this time too. When getting married, Brian said, it's okay to become a family slowly. However, from the beginning, Brian never intended to become a family with me. Realizing this now makes me feel foolish. So, I've decided to end it. Nothing changed with Kristen. She probably never intended to accept me as her mother. All she ever wanted was to have someone to meet her demands, someone convenient. Brian and Kristen can enjoy their time while it lasts. Both of them can go back to hell together. My name is Gina, a 52-year-old housewife. I married Brian, a former classmate, 10 years ago after reuniting at a high school reunion. I've always had many hobbies, like drawing and sewing, which I also work with today. This work was fulfilling, so I had little interest in marriage even after turning 40. However, Brian, a former classmate, understood me and approached me. When Brian and I started dating, the first person he introduced me to was his daughter, Kristen. She was 12 at the time, a sensitive age, and during our first meeting, she didn't speak at all, just played with her smartphone. Even when I tried to talk to her, she wouldn't even nod in response. Despite that, I actively tried to involve myself with Kristen. But the response was lukewarm, and sometimes she would sigh deeply. I thought I couldn't marry under such circumstances, but Brian said, just because there's no reaction doesn't mean Kristen doesn't acknowledge you. Let's become a family slowly. Thanks to him, I was able to commit to the marriage. My apartment was spacious enough for one person, let alone three. So Brian and Kristen moved into my apartment, and we started a new life together. Accordingly, I updated all the furniture and appliances to family size before the marriage and prepared for a life together. I decided to start by fulfilling whatever Brian and Kristen wanted, without forcing myself to become a mother. This approach seemed to work as Kristen gradually started to ask for more, like, "Wash this by tomorrow, please." She was involved in sports in junior high, so most of her requests involved laundry. I was happy to do it, feeling joy in running the washing machine every day. However, outside of her requests, I felt like I was just heir to Kristen. Even when watching TV together in the living room, Kristen would only talk to Brian. If I said something, it was as if she didn't hear me. Yet, when she needed something, like juice, snacks, or a blanket, she would ask. Still, it was better than being completely ignored, so I responded immediately. But since I also work, I couldn't always meet her demands. I often work at home, but sometimes I'm too busy to spare any time. When Kristen requests something like, "I want stew now," or "buy cheesecake from the shop in front of the station," I can't always comply, leading to her dismissively retorting, "Useless," and returning to her room. I felt self-loathing for not meeting Kristen's demands, and wished she would understand my work more. The same was true for my husband, Brian. Brian approached me strongly after the reunion. However, it seems like he subscribes to the "once you've caught the fish, you don't need to feed it" philosophy, as our conversations have dwindled since getting married. Even when I bring up classmates or reminisce about the past, he says he's too tired to talk and shuts the conversation down. Indeed, he often comes home tired from work. So I've decided to let him set the pace for our interactions. But hardly ever does Brian initiate a conversation with me. In fact, his attitude towards me, much like Kristen's, is to only make demands when needed and otherwise treat me as if I'm not there. This being my first marriage after turning 40, I convinced myself that perhaps this is what marriage is like. Now, 10 years into our marriage and 10 years as Kristen's legal mother, their treatment of me as if I were invisible, except when needed, had not particularly changed. I've tried my best to juggle work and household duties, ensuring neither Brian nor Kristen feel neglected. When Kristen was in high school, she would often invite friends over for loud gatherings. One time, the mess they made was blamed on me when Brian got home. Brian said, "You were home, weren't you? How could you let this happen when an adult was present? This is all your fault. Make sure you fix everything." Indeed, I was home but busy working in my office. Nonetheless, without making excuses, I spent all night cleaning up. Kristen's smug laugh at the situation is something I can't forget. Whenever Kristen got into trouble at school, it was always me who had to deal with it. If she stole something from a classmate, I was the one apologizing profusely to the teacher, the student, and their parents. I was prepared to apologize as many times as needed. I knew Kristen didn't want to be scolded by me, so I never blamed her directly. When I tried to explain things to Brian, hoping he would talk to her, he would say, "It's your lack of supervision. Why should Kristen need to be scolded? Reflect on this by yourself." It was always deemed my responsibility. Moreover, though I was the one who was always called to school for Kristen's misbehavior, I was never allowed to participate in any of her school events. Brian would attend those alone. Whether it was the school festival, parent-teacher meetings, or even her graduation, I was never informed about the events in advance and thus missed them. Not even being allowed to attend her graduation was especially heartbreaking. Feeling lonely and sad doesn't even begin to cover it. The overwhelming sensation was one of being an inadequate part of the family, even after 10 years. Now, Kristen is 22 and about to graduate from university, and embarrassingly, I have no idea what her plans are afterward. When I subtly ask Brian, all I get is a cold, "What does Kristen's future have to do with you?" Reflecting on it, Brian has been coming home less frequently since Kristen became an adult. He claims to be busy with work and with more business trips. Yet his salary doesn't seem to reflect his extra work. Instead, our savings, which we started building together after marriage, seem to be dwindling. Asking Brian about it only leads to evasive answers. I sighed heavily, resting my cheek on my hand at my work desk, when I received a call from the president of the company I work with. It was a job offer. I accepted the job without hesitation and ended the call. That's right, I have work. I have important work to be proud of, so for now, I'll focus on doing my best at my job. I refocused on my desk with a renewed sense of purpose. One day, while I was outside taking out the trash, the wife next door rushed over to me. "Congratulations. I heard Kristen is getting married?" I was taken aback. This was the first I'd heard of Kristen's marriage. Brian was so happy talking about it. "You had the family meeting already, right? The boy comes from a good family, doesn't he? Kristen is so lucky. I had no knowledge of any family meeting. Was it Brian who attended alone?" I felt like my blood was draining from my body. I managed to smile to hide my shock. If this was true, it was incredibly sad that such important news wasn't shared with me. Back home, I started the washing machine. In almost 10 years of daily laundry, had Brian or Kristen ever expressed gratitude? Of course, I didn't do household chores to be thanked. I did it because I thought of myself as part of the family, doing my part for everyone. As the washing machine filled with water, I reflected on the various emotions of the past decade. If Kristen is getting married, perhaps this could be a new chapter for her. While loading the clothes, I picked up one of Brian's shirts. It was imbued with the scent of women's perfume. Looking closer, I found traces of makeup and lipstick. Even if he tried to hide it, doing laundry every day made these discrepancies obvious. Yes, I've felt this unease since Kristen reached adulthood. Yet I've continued to serve without complaint. Similarly, since stopping attending university as frequently due to her impending graduation, Kristen started going out in the afternoon and often wouldn't return until the morning. Brian and Kristen, they live so freely. Perhaps it's time I also found my freedom. I sensed the end of my relationship with both Kristen and Brian. It feels like the right time, a sentiment I strongly feel. As Kristen finally woke up around noon and saw me, she didn't even say good morning. I asked her directly. Good morning. Is it true you're getting married? Kristen paused, about to drink water, at my question. After taking a gulp, she said, "It's none of your business," and turned to go back to her room. But I continued the conversation. Of course it's my business too, we live together, after all. I want to celebrate with you. When I said that, Kristen glared at me sharply and retorted. What? I told you it's none of your business, didn't I? If you're so eager to celebrate, then give me $100,000. I'm getting married and need to buy a house. That will be the down payment for the house mortgage. That's what you can do for me, Kristen said with a half smile, clearly thinking it was impossible for me. I have always tried to meet Kristen's demands as much as possible. There were times when I couldn't, then I fell into severe self-loathing. So, I decided to meet this demand too. Understood. I said that and took out my smartphone. Even at my age, in my 50s, using a smartphone is no big deal. After finishing with my smartphone, I looked at Kristen. She was still giving me a sharp look. I've transferred the $100,000, which was the online banking limit. Check it for yourself. Congratulations on your marriage, Kristen. At my words, Kristen's face twisted. Gross. I was already used to Kristen's reactions. So, whatever she says, I no longer get upset. With that face, you might scare away your fiancé, you know? I just gave you $100,000, so the least you could say is thank you. Normally, I wouldn't speak to Kristen like this. But something had already ended inside me. I should have spoken my mind like this from the beginning. There's so much I regret. But regrets won't help me move forward. So, it's time to end it. A fake mom acting all high and mighty with just a little money. You're not even invited to the wedding. Kristen looked at me with laughter. I know. I'm a fake mother. Yet, even being fake, just the word mom coming from Kristen makes something well up inside me, revealing how weak I am. You know, my fiancé's dad is a big shot at a top apparel company. My fiancé also works there and is set to take over the company in the future. In other words, he's on an elite path. You get it, right? He lives in a different world from you. You're an unemployed housewife that just stays at home. I thought calling me an unemployed housewife was a bit much. I do work, after all. Well, neither Brian nor Kristen has ever shown any interest in my job. Once I'm married, I'll be an elite too. If they find out someone like you is at home, it might even lead to a breakup. That's why only Dad came for the meeting. You're just a live-in maid, as far as they know. It seems that's what Dad intended from the start when he married you. Even if I had suspected as much, hearing it directly still hurts. As I pondered this, a loud bang of a door closing echoed. It was the sound of Kristen leaving the house. Almost simultaneously, my smartphone rang. It was the company president who had given me a job request, calling to discuss the upcoming project. I hastily prepared to leave the house, not having time to dwell on my feelings. Hours later, after the meeting, I returned home. It was completely dark inside, neither Brian nor Kristen were back yet. I turned on the lights and sat down on the living room sofa, taking a sip of water. Then, I slowly reflected on the past 10 years. When we decided to get married, Brian said, "We can slowly become a family." It was those words that led me to step into this marriage. However, Brian never intended to become a family with me from the start. At the reunion, he probably just saw a convenient housekeeper who happened to be single. Realizing this now makes me feel foolish. So, it's time to end it. Nothing changed with Kristen either. She probably never intended to accept me as her mother. Being only a convenient person who responds to demands was all that was expected of me. I'm not invited to the wedding? Gladly. I couldn't help but voice out, imagining the hell that awaits. It's funny they think a wedding will actually take place. Strangely, I don't feel happy at all. Yet, I wanted to be a mother, to be part of a family. I thought that if I worked hard enough, it would happen someday. Whether these 10 years have been long or short, I don't know. One might say it was a good experience, in a hypocritical sense, and be content with that. Unfortunately, I am not such a good person. I have no intention of dismissing the past decade with Brian and Kristen as a good experience. It's foolish of me to have dedicated 10 valuable years to such unworthy individuals. But their attempts to dominate others for their own selfish reasons are equally foolish. At this very moment, they behave freely, basking in self-satisfaction. They are like demons living in hell. Brian and Kristen can enjoy their delusions for now. Soon, they'll both be returning to hell. On that day, I visited a towering building in the city center. The first floor housed a large bridal salon, popular for managing everything from ceremonies to receptions and fitting wedding dresses. It's run by the most influential apparel company in the area, known for its momentum. I smiled at the receptionist at the entrance. Being a familiar face, it was easy for me to get into the salon. A couple was there today to select a dress. I came to greet them, as the groom is the son of the president I've been closely working with. The job he requested was for his son's wedding. I believe the design I submitted recently is one of my best works. I hope the bride likes it. I paused outside the room guided by the salon staff, hearing the bride's laughter from within, likely trying on dresses. Never think this happiness would last forever. "What are you doing here?" Kristen exclaimed in surprise upon seeing me. "Gina. Why are you here?" Despite it being a weekday afternoon, Brian was there. His presence puzzled me, but it no longer mattered. President Owen, the president who had been grateful for my work, stood beyond them. "Gina, thank you for coming. We're deeply grateful for your contribution. I'm thankful to our relationship." Seeing President Owen bowing deeply to me, Kristen made a puzzled face. "Father, why are you bowing to someone like her? This person is..." Before Kristen could finish calling me a mere helper, another man in the back interrupted her statement. "We've been waiting for you, Gina." With his tall stature and refreshing demeanor, he resembled a fairy tale prince. This man was the groom, James Owen, the son of President Owen. It was I who invited Gina. Having her here for the dress fitting shouldn't be a problem, right? Kristen was wearing a pure white wedding dress. Despite the saying, clothes make the man, it suited her well. No, James, this person isn't my mother or anything. So, it's troubling that she was called here. That's right, James. I'm going to divorce this woman. So, she's an outsider. Can you ask her to leave? Amidst the chaos, a divorce declaration was made, but it didn't bother me in the least. In fact, I happen to have a divorce form with me, so I might as well have him fill it out now. As the two panicked, James responded with a supreme smile. I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you two are implying. Gina is here at my invitation. Is there a problem with inviting our company's esteemed designer? Who has supported us for 30 years? Kristen and Brian were baffled, not grasping the significance of his words. Kristen, the dress you're wearing was designed by Gina. You said you loved it. You look beautiful. James commented with an unsettlingly noble smile, causing Brian and Kristen to turn pale. I studied fashion in college and have been aiming to become a fashion designer since my student days. Having always enjoyed drawing and sewing, I knew this was my true calling and dove into the field. President Owen, who had just assumed his role at the time, immediately took a liking to my designs. Whether by the flow of time or sheer coincidence, his company struck gold with my designs, growing into a leading giant in the apparel industry. Since then, President Owen has continued to say that my designs are essential for the company, employing me to this day. Conversely, my success as a fashion designer is also thanks to President Owen. I owe an immeasurable debt of gratitude to him. About 2 months ago, I received a sudden job request from President Owen. He asked me to design a wedding dress because his son was getting married. I was called for a meeting by the president recently and went to the cafe where we agreed to meet. Waiting for me there was James. I'm sorry. My father was suddenly called away on business, so I've come in his stead. I was surprised to see how much James had matured since we last met. The thought of him getting married filled me with a parent-like warmth. I showed James the designs I had come up with. Being for a wedding dress, I had put extra effort into these designs. James seemed to like my designs, which was a relief. After sharing my designs with him, he promised to discuss them with his father and fiancé, though his somber demeanor lingered. Is something wrong, James? You seem down. Are you tired? I asked, concerned by his melancholic expression and the brief flash of tears in his eyes. Captivated by his beauty even in such an unseemly moment. I'm sorry. Maybe it's pre-wedding jitters? It's embarrassing for a guy to admit. But since you've known me for so long, Gina, I wanted to confide in you. I can't bring myself to trust her. Saying that, James showed me a photo of his fiancée. It was unmistakably Kristen. I was shocked to my core, but I managed to compose myself and asked where they met. It's a bit embarrassing. But I've always been in all-boys schools and was quite the bookworm, so I never really dated. It wasn't until graduate school, years later, that I had my first drink with a woman. Kristen was the one who took an interest in him and started the conversation. James, having almost no immunity against women, was quite thrilled. He couldn't even tell if this was what falling in love felt like. At first, I thought she was modest and feminine. But after our engagement, when she learned about my family background, her attitude began to change gradually. Kristen started demanding money for various reasons. James, not wanting to upset her, complied with her requests. This sounded all too familiar. Despite demanding money, she doesn't wear expensive items or indulge in lavish meals. I wonder what she's using it for. Should I really go through with this marriage? And he hesitated, suggesting there were more reasons for his melancholy. James, you can tell me anything. Don't hold back. Encouraged by my words, James decided to open up. her father, my future father-in-law, I was told he remarried 10 years ago. But as far as I can recall, he's been involved with several women. Our company has an office near the entertainment district. And I always see him there when I visit at night. He even witnessed him entering motels. Although I was prepared for this, it was still a heavy blow. Having relationships with several women shows quite the audacity. I'm sure he's thinking of himself as being popular. Kristen's behavior and Brian's promiscuity were clear. James seemed truly hesitant about getting married. It felt like he was looking for someone to push him to call off the engagement. Given his position as the president's son and having already met the families, he found it difficult to bring up breaking off the engagement. If he were to do so, Kristen, knowing her, would likely demand a hefty sum for compensation. It was time I shared the truth with James. James, the truth is, I explained my relationship with Brian and Kristen, including how they treated me on a daily basis, which was almost like venting my frustrations. I felt terrible for not being upfront sooner. Of course, James was shocked. I would be happy to have you as my mother-in-law, Gina. But this, wow, the world is really small, isn't it? I also mentioned the $100,000 I gave to Kristen, intended for their new home's mortgage. I had no idea about the $100,000. I was told to arrange the new home myself, and I've never heard about this money before. This is unbelievable. As I suspected. James was visibly disheartened. Kristen was nothing but a bundle of greed. I couldn't let her continue to torment such a pure-hearted person like James. I proposed a plan to James, and he readily agreed. I'm really glad I could talk to you, Gina. James seemed to cheer up a bit, quickly drinking a glass of water and smiling brightly. Meanwhile, at the salon, Kristen and Brian were frozen with shock upon learning that the wedding dress was designed by me. Wait. Your design? What does that mean? I briefly explained the situation to Kristen, who seemed unable to grasp it, while Brian was stunned to learn about my profession for the first time. You look down on me as an unemployed housewife. But it turns out I have a proper job. Brian, you didn't know either, did you? You never showed any interest in me. You never even tried to know me. With that, I walked over to the projector in the room. I connected my smartphone to the projector and turned it on. The images projected onto the salon's white wall startled everyone, especially Brian. Yikes. Brian exclaimed in shock as the video showed him entering a motel with different women on various occasions. The undeniable evidence left no room for escape. Brian stammered, why do you have this footage? The staff at the salon restrained him as he looked ready to bolt. I had asked James to capture this footage, but I remained silent and played the next video. Stop, please. Next, it was Kristen who let out a scream. The next clip was a video letter. I had asked an employee at a club Kristen frequents to send her a message. Hi Kristen, congrats on the wedding. The man in the video, with his flashy hair color and jacket, was undeniably handsome. Clearly, he was a man from a nightclub. Kristen, thanks for coming so much. Because of you, I've become #1 here, and I'm really grateful. You said you'd keep coming even after getting married, right? You promised to splurge with your husband's money. Oh, Mr. Husband. Don't worry. There's absolutely no physical relationship between Kristen and me. She came onto me pretty strong, but I've been refusing her. As the cheerful and bright video of the man faded, the salon fell into a silence as somber as a wake. No one knew what to say, but with the video evidence presented, no one could make excuses either. The first to break the silence was James. Kristen, I was willing to overlook how you spent the money I gave you. But funding another man is a different story, isn't it? I can't accept that. The $100,000 you received from Gina was also given to this man, wasn't it? Do you love me, or do you just love money? I don't know anymore. James looked sad. Kristen, her face turning red, loudly retorted. You're boring despite having the looks and money. If you can't satisfy me, at least provide money. Whether she knew it or not, Kristen trampled all over James's insecurities with heavy boots. If that's her reason for spending at a nightclub, then marriage shouldn't even be considered. I guess I'm not enough. But my company matters more to me. I can't marry someone like you. Let's call off the wedding. At James's words, Kristen wore a look of dissatisfaction. This is a joke, right? I didn't even job hunt because I thought we were getting married. What's going to happen to me now? James began preparing to go home, ignoring Kristen. Brian had quit his job. The shallow attempt to benefit from getting Kristen and James married was despicable. I presented Brian with the divorce papers. Do you remember what you told me when we got married? I guess you don't. That's fine. It's a shame we never really became a family. Brian looked at me and started to cry pathetically. Gina. It was my fault, please don't divorce me. His tears seemed insincere, especially since he had just declared he would divorce me. He probably only said that after realizing I was a legitimate designer. I looked at Brian's pitiful face and delivered my final words as his wife. I won't ask for the last 10 years back. But at least, let me have my revenge. I'll be claiming compensation, so look forward to it. Not just for infidelity, but also for the treatment you and Kristen subjected me to. Which is considered marital harassment. So, I'll be claiming for that too. Goodbye. Brian collapsed to his knees, truly crying this time. What? Why? You're going to claim compensation from me too? What do you mean by marital harassment? You can't prove that. Kristen furiously raged, face twisted in anger. Unfortunately for her, it can indeed be proven. Shortly after we got married, I started carrying a voice recorder in my pocket at all times. Now, after 10 years, it seems like it's finally going to see the light of day. And boy, does this woman have a temper. She's not my daughter, not by a long shot. Come on, get out of that dress, will you? Pure white doesn't suit you at all. You know what would? A demon mask. With that, Kristen became even angrier and started causing a scene. Only to be restrained by the salon staff. If she's got that strong of a will, she'll manage somehow in the future. Seeing Kristen's true colors, President Owen couldn't hide his shock as he left the salon. James, on the other hand, seemed to have weight lifted off his shoulders. Escorted kindly by James, I left the salon, which had turned into a scene from hell. Only Kristen's cries of despair echoed behind us. James, it looks like work is going well for you. Since then, James and I occasionally meet for coffee. He says this incident is partly due to his own naivety and has no plans to demand any compensation. For now, he's putting marriage out of his mind and focusing on his career. I'd like to work overseas someday. My father is also considering expanding our business abroad. I heard your designs are quite popular overseas, Gina. James spoke of the future with sparkling eyes. Kristen, who missed out on marrying such a fine young man, is truly foolish. Naturally, I had Brian and Kristen move out of my apartment. The savings that were supposed to be split in the divorce had been squandered by Brian on other women, leaving them with barely any money. They're now living modestly in an apartment, paying off the compensation to me by working day in and day out at part-time jobs. Kristen, never having worked a day in her life and with a too strong personality, apparently can't hold down a job. Brian called me crying about it once, but I just brushed him off. Let's have coffee again, Gina. With those words, James headed home and I waved goodbye. I hope James finds a truly wonderful partner next time. With a motherly sentiment, I prayed for his happiness. Today is a beautiful day. The blue sky seen through the window is dazzling. As we approach winter, the air is cold, but the sunlight feels warm. What will people wear on such a beautiful day? I always think of these things when I imagine designs. To have them take shape, be worn, and bring smiles to people's faces, that's my wish. So today, too, I sit at my desk, drawing designs, hoping for the happiness of whoever will wear them.